My guest today is Fiona Scott Morton. Fiona is a professor of economics at Yale University. She holds a PhD from MIT and is a fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Her research focuses on the economics of competition and antitrust. She has previously worked as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust in the Obama administration.
Let me move on to your second very recent paper, which is Google. There, the case is harder from the perspective of public opinion, I guess, because we all feel like, okay, we like our Google Maps, we like our Gmail. I mean, we don't feel as kind of attacked in some sense by Facebook, as by Google, as we have felt, many of us, by Facebook. You still say in the digital advertising market, virtually all roads lead through Google. Google would say, well, we are not doing any evil. We're just, better. What's the case against Google? What's the way in which they have abused their market power or done things that help them preserve or acquire more market power?
After Google invented their very good search engine, what they did was set forth on a journey to impose exclusive contracts on nearly all sources of traffic. So first, those exclusive contracts were with portals and wireless carriers like Verizon, and then with the iPhone, with handset makers, so that Bing could not get onto those sources of traffic, except if the user took steps to load Bing because Google was the default on the front screen. After that, Google launched Android and became active. Android is a mobile operating system, and therefore required all handset makers and wireless carriers to put Google search again as the default on the front page of that handset. So those exclusives shut out Bing from quantity of searches. And if you don't have quantity of searches, you can't build quality of searches, because you need to learn what consumers are looking for. So those exclusives, in my view, are not competition on the merits. It's not like Google saying, oh, I've got a search engine, Bing's got a search engine, consumers, please try them both and use the one you think is better. No, we're going to force everybody to use ours. And then if you do that, of course, eventually yours will be better because of these quantity.
In fact, some of the aspects that you discussed sound quite similar to the Microsoft first screen control default on using the Microsoft search engines Explorer at the end of the 90s. The case is relatively similar in that sense, right?
I agree with you.
And why has it been hard to make?
The FTC staff recommended that the FTC bring a case against Google in 2013, and the Democratic commissioners did not vote for that. So that's Julie Brill, Edith Ramirez, and John Leibowitz, and I don't know what the reasoning was there. Usually staff recommendations are quite powerful. But then the story continues, because let's say you want, therefore, to enter with a search engine. You now have to enter with a search engine and a mobile operating system together so that you can put the search engine on the handset, because you need to have your own operating system to do that. Google further had a contract with its handset makers that prevented them from launching their own operating system based on the open source Android. If they launched that their own operating system, they would have to stop selling Google Android handsets. So you'd have to go from 100% Google to 100% your own, and of course that's super risky. Your own operating system might not work. So that's another way to raise barriers to entry. And then Google took the advantage in search and leveraged that into display. And the paper that I released a few weeks ago talks about how Google bought different properties in the display stack, and then again used this exclusive tactic. You cannot buy ads on YouTube, which we own, unless you use the digital display ad technology that belongs to Google. And Google will set it up so that rivals are disadvantaged, they're slower, or their prices are higher, or they are getting the dregs of the opportunities and not the good ones. and tilt the playing field to get more and more of the share to Google, to the point where now on the publisher side, Google has about a 90% share. And in the middle, the ad server, the demand side platforms and servers in the middle, 50.
So just explain that a little bit more to your listeners. So when you are going to the New York Times site or to some other site and you see an ad for some display ad for a holiday or something, 90% of the time, what is it exactly that Google controls? Just, you're saying in your paper, it's not just selling that ad to the platform, but much more, right?
No, Google will, for 90% of those cases, Google is operating the publisher's technology that decides which ad to go in the empty spot. 90% of the time, Google is operating the server the advertiser uses. Let's say it's Coca-Cola, operating that ad server. Then in between those two ad servers is a confusing set of technologies that, for example, creates bids and goes out to different ad exchanges and says, who's got supply, who's got demand, what are the bids, how am I going to figure out the winner from these bids? Google runs a lot of those operations and chooses how to set the price. So Google's operating for the buyer, operating for the seller, designing the rules of the auction, and running the auction. Okay, so if you were buying and selling stocks like this, you would never agree to it. Like, I'm not going to sell a stock when I know that my agent, the seller, is also working for the buyer and is also the auctioneer and is also deciding how the money's going to flow. I mean, obviously, you're going to get a large take rate in that world. What's a take rate? The difference between, let's say, the advertiser pays €1 and the New York Times gets 30 cents. The 70 cents is the take rate, and that's going to be high when you have a profit maximizing firm doing everything.
I think that was super clear. I mean, this sounds like the perfect monopoly, right? You are the exclusive agent for the seller, for the buyer, and you are the one running all the price determination in between. So it is pretty kind of scary. And then you didn't add one last bit, which is the maps. How important is the maps in this whole story? Google Maps.
The maps, we need to go back to search for that. Google Maps is really important for search. If I am searching for pizza, it's probably because I'm hungry and I want to buy a pizza right then. And it matters greatly where I am. And because we're all carrying mobile devices, the device or the app can know where you are. And that enables the selling of advertising by local businesses, nearby businesses, or just relevant businesses for my geography. That's extremely important. I think it's one reason why Google purchased Waze, because Waze was a very successful, accurate mapping system. And if Waze had contracted with Google's rivals, let's imagine Bing, or let's imagine one of the specialized search engines, then that combination would have been able to deliver very good localized information, also geographic information. It's another reason why some authorities are looking at the purchase of Fitbit, because that would enable Google to learn more about where the person is.
So then let's go, although it's kind of clearer in this case, let's go again to the harms. Who's getting harmed by this? What is the problem if Google has 90% of the market?
Yeah.
Who's suffering?
Well, of course, search is really important. And if we had 2 or 3 or 4 companies all competing hard in search, we'd have more innovation in search. We'd have higher quality in search. So that's really important. Then the people who buy the ads, the advertisers, once again, this is customer acquisition. They pass those costs through to consumers, at least in part, and we're all paying higher prices for goods and services because our firms are paying higher ad prices. And then, particularly on the ad tech side, there's a real harm to content on the internet. If you think about an advertiser paying $1 and the website getting 30 cents, let's imagine that in a competitive market, the advertiser would pay 90 cents and the website would get 70 cents. Okay. In other words, the take rate of the ad tech stack would shrink a lot under competition. Well, what is the practical effect of that website going from 30 cents to 70 cents? Well, their revenue just doubled from advertising. If they are a cooking site, they're going to give me more recipes with better pictures. If they're a news site, they're going to give me more reporters and more high quality. So the quality of all the businesses that we like to consume on the internet is badly affected when ad revenue doesn't flow to them, when it's flowing to Google instead. And the ultimate way in which Google can maximize its ad revenue is if it doesn't even have to pay the 30 cents to the publisher. How does that work? Google News, Google Flights, Google Local, right? In all of those cases, you, the user, are being directed to Google's properties, and Google can keep 100% of the advertising money there. But that then decreases the variety and breadth of the content on the internet.
And I think this, as a user, this is something that increasingly, I think, bothers me and bothers many of us. Like, you try to look for something, Wikipedia is the fifth result of most people go to Wikipedia. Rotten Tomatoes has disappeared from the page, and there is something else. This seems, on the face of it, really anti-competitive. You're the monopolist. You're essentially an essential facility to reach these destinations, and Google is kind of directing you somewhere else. This does look, on the face of it, very aggressive. How are they getting away with it?
Because antitrust enforcement is not working very well anymore. In the United States, we have courts that are quite hostile to enforcement, I think, in many cases, and we have not been moving the ball forward with respect to cutting-edge technologies. We haven't been bringing cases that are about ad-supported businesses. So now not only do you have courts with a high standard, you have courts that are unfamiliar with the technology and no precedent. In Europe, the cases have been brought, but they take a very long time, and then there are fines at the end of the day, which doesn't change the competitive landscape. So consumers don't see an improvement because the fines don't alter their choices. So I agree with you, it's a tremendous problem. I agree with you that there's harm. I think the ability of the most important input provider of eyeballs to move those eyeballs to its own services in order to degrade the quality of a rival search engine, for example, is harming competition in the short run and the long run, and depriving consumers of the innovation and the choice that they would otherwise get. So I think we need to improve the way we police competition in this space.